about 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes. Those few people still on their way. 2 more minutes. All right, you ready to film?
Yeah, it's live.
Oh, the lazy bike. The lazy bike. Put this back because it's got I get the lazy bike. But we got an apple. I need to be a pen to do it.
Yeah, this.
Sit with your brother. Sit with your brother. Hey guys, how are you guys? Pretty good.
You should continue.
I came up here to charge my phone, and I'm a little curious on a couple points because there's issues last night.
You should go. You can deal with this later.
But if that mic stops working because it has no battery life, because it didn't last night, you will have issues.
That's true. That is true. Huh?
I'm just.
That's true. That'll
I'm the
not
one that
affect
gets
it.
phone calls in the middle of services. Mike, this isn't working. But I do appreciate your efforts
What is that?
That's the live stream.
and our cool
Is it
little
your phone?
camera thing.
It's the nice camera.
And then weird my phone.
Your phone is in your hand.
I know, but I need to charge it.
Well, good morning. So good to have you with us this morning. We are excited for today and our gardening in the tropics and survival gardening. It's our first of preparedness seminars, preparedness workshops, follow up to the seminar that we had a few weeks back. If you missed the seminar last month, actually, it's all available online. There's a special Facebook group. On your way in, there was a little flyer making yourself ready about some of the workshops that we have coming up. Basically, the end of each month, we're going to be doing a workshop, and then on the back it gives you the instructions. The Making Yourself Ready seminar is a private Facebook group for those of you that want to kind of continue to grow and even have the dialogue back and forth. Hey, I found this. What do you think about this? And it's a great little place to kind of share resources with one another. But you have to be invited into it, or you can ask to be part of the group. Okay, that's what makes it private. So you can click on that and find out more details, and then that'll be good. Let's begin with a word of prayer, and I have a short little devotion, and we'll share what's going to happen today. Lord God, we thank you for your amazing love. We thank you that you are the ultimate gardener. You have a beautiful creation that you've placed us in. And you've called us to tend that garden, to be good stewards. And Lord, that's our desire, to hear you say, well done, good and faithful servant. So Lord, may we be good stewards of everything that you've entrusted to us. And that includes the land, that includes our time, that includes our lives. Because ultimately our lives are not our own. We were bought with a very high price, the price of your blood. So Lord, bless our time this morning. May we be as iron sharpening iron, spurring one another on in love and good deeds. Speak to our hearts, speak to our hands, speak to our heads. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. About 4 years ago, my wife and I moved to Lake Worth. We were living down in Boca at the time, and we felt that the Lord was calling us to be a little bit closer to our church community, and we wanted to get a little bit more land so that we could be a little bit more independent, self-sufficient in a sense. And part of one of the verses as I was praying about, which house to buy and what to do, and all these options, the Lord took me to Jeremiah 29. Now, maybe you're like, oh yeah, 29:11. And yes, 29:11 is a great verse. You know that verse. For I know the plans I have for you. This is the declaration of the Lord. Plans for your well-being, not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. You will call me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. Great verse. We all know that verse. Some of you, that's your life verse. But that wasn't the verse that the Lord took me to. It was funny because I was reading through the scriptures, and I happened to get to Jeremiah 29. I wasn't even thinking about 29:11. And a few verses earlier, this is what the Lord said. This is what the Lord of armies, the God of Israel, says to all the exiles I deported from Jerusalem to Babylon. Well, we're living in Babylon. He says, build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Find wives for yourselves. Check, already had that. And sons and your daughters, and give your daughters to men in marriage so that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there, do not decrease. Pursue the well-being of the city I have deported you to. Pray to the Lord on its behalf, for when it thrives, you will thrive. Powerful passage. And then it's just a couple verses later, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for hope and future, so forth. And the Lord was just impressed by my heart. I was called to build. We're actually building a little addition, a little guest house, and to plant gardens. And so we started some of those things, and some of those things we didn't, we got some fruit trees planted, but we didn't get the garden planted. And so I'm like, I need a lot of help and I need accountability, and it seems the only thing that gives me the best accountability is when I schedule it on the church calendar. So it's on the church calendar, and I think you all are interested in it too. And so a while back, when I was praying about this, I kept running into this guy called Connor. I was talking to different people in our congregation. They said, oh yeah, Connor from Incredible Edible Landscapes. You need to call him. And that's what one of our people in the congregation said. And they just got a bunch of trees and plants from Connor, and they were learning about gardening. And then it was a couple weeks later, I was talking to somebody about gardening, and they said, you need to talk to Connor. I'm like, okay, this is confirmation. Or is it confirmation? That was bad. Anyway, and so then we had our seminar last month, and I thought, I was looking online, and I was like, okay, you know what, this guy, let me check out his website, let me give him a call. And we talked on the phone, and then he came and did a little consultation here for the church, because we're planning on doing something in the church to actually make the church more, have some areas in the church grounds that are a community garden, and actually even a sanctuary garden that would be a place of meditation and prayer. And he and I talked, and then he came over to my house and gave me some counsel, and it was like a 3-hour tour. I mean, it was like a long time, and ended up staying for dinner. Just a neat family. His wife Iris is here with us, and they're expecting their first child in January, and so we're excited for them. They're propagating in many ways. So, but you're going to be blessed with what he has to share. He's a young guy that the Lord has blessed with much wisdom. And they've started this business, Incredible Edibles, a few years back, but been doing it full-time for just a few months now since COVID. And so please welcome Connor.
Thank you. Yeah, COVID was our boost. So good morning, everybody. I never thought my obsession with plants would land me on the stage at Reveal Fellowship Church. So thank you all for having me, and thank you, Pastor Ty. Blessed to be here. So, like you said, my name is Connor, and my business, Incredible Edible Landscapes, founded 2017. That's when our first tree went in the ground. So the core of the business is our nursery, which is stocked with all sorts of tropical fruit trees. We do tropical vegetables, herbs, spices, native plants, pollinator plants, a lot of things that you may not have heard of. So we try to cultivate a selection of the best of the best. particularly because it's less than a fifth of an acre of a nursery and we have limited space, so we gotta choose the right things. So that's another overhead shot. So what we do is, outside of the nursery, is we try to help people in the Palm Beach County community to grow their own food. We do garden beds like these pictured for the fall and winter veggie growing season. That's really our annual vegetable gardening season in Florida. But for the rest of the year, we gotta also be growing our own food. So there's another garden bed, and there's a great picture as well. So we try to really focus on the tropical agriculture, meaning things that actually want to grow in Florida. And just before we even get too deep, like, how many of you guys are gardeners already? Like level 1 gardeners, level 2 gardeners, no hands. Okay. Yeah, so a lot of people come into this coming from up north, where you plant your tomatoes in May and June, and then you're done by October. Everything's different here, just right off the bat. So I'm going to probably be telling you about some plants and some ideas that may not be familiar, but you got to understand Florida, and South Florida specifically, is a different world than the rest of the country. So I like to call it tropical privilege, because we can grow 12 months out of the year. We don't have frost or snow, except for very rarely. We're borderline true tropical. So what we try to do is, we call it ecological landscaping. We do design and installation of what's called a food forest, or I like to call it a holistic orchard, meaning you're not only growing like a traditional orchard, rows of fruit trees and nothing but grass in between, but you're growing an entire balanced ecology. You're trying to imitate nature. You're filling in all the functions that the different plants would have in a natural ecosystem. So everything kind of supports each other. And I should just be rolling through these because we got a lot of images. So we want people to be excited and invigorated by their gardens. We don't think it should be a whole lot of work. We don't think it should be, a crazy amount of sweat equity. We want people to learn about tropical agriculture and forest ecology and how nature actually works to provide, and not just be Googling, why is my basil dying every year? So like, for example, the Garden of Eden, there was fruit trees, and there was fruit on every tree 12 months out of the year. They didn't have to do anything. It was all provided for. Unfortunately, we don't have that anymore, but God's graceful, and He doesn't want us to be slaving and to the point of demotivation, too, if we want to grow our food. We got to be motivated to learn, and it's got to be fruitful. So I'm just going to go through like some of our projects recently. This is a project up in Tequesta where we turned, I don't even know, probably 8,000 square feet of lawn or so into a food forest. It's basically a meadow-style garden with fruit trees and clumping grasses and native plants and pineapples and perennial veggies and flowers and all sorts of things. And here's one actually just finished, Thursday, wrapped up this garden. We transformed this entire front lawn into a really awesome food forest. And there's probably 50 different species there. I think 250 or so individual plants with room for more. So this is before, and the question begs to be asked, are you still dressed like you're living in the Victorian era? Then why does your yard still look like this? Because I'm sure some of you know back in that day, the royalty would take their swaths of land and plant grass just to show the peasants that they had extra room to spare and that they didn't need to use every square inch to be growing their own sustenance. So, there you go. You guys should be dressing up like him if you got a lawn. So, yeah, so that's before. This one we just finished up, and this is after. So, and her neighbors were walking up the entire time of the install. And so, number one determining factor of a successful garden in South Florida. Anybody want to guess? Sun, water, soil. Those are all important. It's all about your choice of plants. Like I said, we're in South Florida. This is a different world than everywhere else. We can't grow the same plants. So what comes to mind when you think about planting a garden? Again, anybody? Well, like what plants? Tomato. I knew it was going to be the answer. Okay, so this is a tomato that I grew a couple years ago. That's what you call ugly produce. It was actually quite a delicious tomato. But I'm still proud of it, even though I'm going to be talking down growing all those Yankee plants. We're in South Florida, guys. We're in the tropics. So I didn't know this was the first of the series that Ty is starting here, but I'm honored. And so we're going to be looking at it from the approach of like a survival garden. Like we all know how fragile our food system is, the distribution, you know, if the truckers boycotted, we'd all be starving in 2 days, etc. So if we all had to grow our own food, what would we plant? So, you know, the vegetables, like the tomatoes and the lettuce and the basil and everything, we can grow plenty of that in about October through March, April, in the cool season here. But we're gonna focus on, like that's if we have to use our space to put dinner on the table. So, what plants are we gonna grow? What's the number one priority to get your family fed? Calories, right? Number one. And another thing about tropical privilege is we can grow our calories in a much more efficient way. Like, we don't grow wheat and grains and all that kind of thing in Florida because we're fortunate because, you know, if you had to grow wheat as your staple crop to get all your calories, you would need acres and acres and acres, and you would need an entire labor force because wheat is a very labor-intensive thing to process, to get those stalks into food on your table, to turn it into bread. That takes a lot. So we're in the tropics, and we can grow calorie-dense food that's basically ready to go right out of the ground. We have a lot of root crops that we can grow. So first, we're gonna just focus on calorie crops, starches, tubers, like sweet potato. Number one, you know, most delicious starch crop that I grow. Low investment, high reward. You're not gonna have to, like, we're looking at it in terms of calories invested and calories harvested, right? So it doesn't take much to open up the back door and chuck the sweet potato chunks out into your yard and just let them root and grow over the summer. That's oversimplified, but you get what I'm saying. So this is actually last year from a little patch in the front yard. We just spontaneously harvested probably 10, 15 pounds yesterday from the same patch that came from that I haven't actually planted in 3 years. They just keep coming back up. So these types of crops grow themselves and very calorie dense. Next one would be yucca, and like my wife's part Cuban, so that's a staple in the Cuban culture and a lot of the tropical cultures. Yucca is super easy to grow. You can put a stick in the ground, wait 8 months, it'll grow into a tree, dig it up, you've got thousands of calories to put on the table. You can make yuca con mojo or yuca fries. They're so easy, and that's one that's just kind of a bulletproof crop. Drought tolerant, super heat tolerant. Like I said, we're talking about things that grow in South Florida without you micromanaging them and babying them. So there's the yucca plant. And the next one of my personal favorites, are yams, which are a totally different plant than sweet potatoes. How many people knew that? I think a lot of people get that confusion that, oh, it's a sweet potato, it's a yam, it's a sweet potato. Totally different plant. It's actually considered an invasive plant by the University of Florida because it's a cousin of the air potato, the Dioscorea bulbifera, which is an invasive, it's not edible, they pop up all over the place. Our parents have them all over your garden. I was like, are you guys growing yams? Her dad's like, no, it's a stupid air potato. So it's a relative, and it's a wild plant. It's a jungle plant it's a vine that will sprout out of the ground in the spring, grow all the way up. It'll find a tree or a fence or anything it can grab onto, grow all the way up into the canopy, and take all that sunlight for the main part of the year. All the energy goes back down in the ground in the fall, the vine dies, it goes dormant, and then you dig this up. That's a purple, so the Latin name is Dioscorea alata, and that's a purple variety. There's also white varieties. And so that's a 10-pound yam. That's actually my friend Chip's picture, who is an avid grower of all of these starch crops that we're going to mention. And so something else you can do with them if you get tired of eating, you control it and manage it well, you can get a lot of reward out of it. So let's look at that yam waffle again. Yeah. He's such a connoisseur. So another one that I should mention is, this is malanga. So you may have probably already had this if you have those like artisanal sweet potato and all different types of root chips that you can get like at Costco. Those fancy looking black bags with the cursive writing on them. They've got sweet potatoes and all different kinds of stuff. They have malanga. That would be the little speckled one in there. And so that is a relative of the ornamental elephant ear. And they're really pretty plants. They like water, they like partial shade, they don't take up a whole lot of space. Great ornamental. And a cousin of the malanga is taro, and that's especially popular in Hawaii. There's so many different varieties. And so that is a good staple crop in all different parts of the world. They come from Southeast Asia originally. Okay, so number 5 under calories is something you may not expect, and this is a picture from less than 24 hours ago. So that was yesterday's harvest. And with our new shirts that just came in, I think it's very fitting. So bananas are a very versatile crop, and I'm a banana fanatic, and so that's just one of our favorite things to grow. But they're a starch crop as well. If you guys have ever had plantains, well, any banana can be cooked green and eaten like a plantain. So from the day of harvest until they're all black on the countertop, there's different stages that you can use them for. They're a great starch crop because they grow all year round. You're harvesting, like, that was probably 65 pounds or so. I don't know, it was kind of hard to hold it with one hand. And so we've got 20-something individual plants, and most of them are young. Only about a dozen have fruited already, and I think we've got 10 different bunches hanging right now, minus that one that's already been cut. And this is less than 1/5 of an acre lot, and we've got, our main area is our nursery, so like we're using such minimal space, and we're growing hundreds of pounds of bananas and other calorie crops every year. And I don't have to go out there and baby them like I do with the basils and the tomatoes. They just grow themselves because they want to grow in the tropics. So we'll be covering bananas again. We're going to go at it twice because I like them so much. But so there's another one of our banana plants. This beautiful little bellflower coming down. So okay, we've got calories covered, and that's only 5 of the top choices that I wanted to use for this. But there's plenty of other ones. Those are just the most bang for your buck. Sweet potatoes, yucca, yams, malanga, bananas. So number 2, priority, if you've got to feed your family, if the grid goes down or whatever, you've got to, after you get your calories in, nutrition, right? Because you want to be healthy. You got that energy from the calories, but you got to get your vitamins and your minerals. This is the second most important thing. And again, we're going to talk about maybe some different leafy green crops that you guys haven't heard of. All of these grow without a ton of input. Tropical privilege. They'll grow in the extreme heat. They'll grow in the drought that we get. They will grow in the rain, all year long, covering perennial crops. So this is just things that you plant once and walk away from, and all you got to do is harvest. So number 1, moringa. And I'm sure some of you have probably heard about this. It's definitely getting across in the health food realm. Usually sold as a powdered product that's been sitting on the shelf for way too long, and it's starting to kind of turn like brownish gray. So when you're growing it at home, it's like growing a health food store in your backyard. Moringa has 92 nutrients and 46 antioxidants, all bioavailable. It's the most nutritious terrestrial plant on Earth.
Wow.
It's 7 times more vitamin C than oranges, 10 times more vitamin A than carrots, 17 times more calcium than milk, 9 times more protein than yogurt, 15 times more potassium than bananas, and 25 times more iron than spinach. So that's just one serving. Very, very potent. So the leaves, the flowers, the immature green seed pods, and the roots are all edible. The plant generally has kind of a peppery flavor to it. The leaves are a bit pungent, like in the back of your throat. So some people like that, and sometimes you want to just kind of slip it into whatever you're cooking and have it be under the radar just to add that multivitamin to what you're eating. So this is what I like to do every year. Every year before the first hurricane of the season rolls in, I chop all my moringa trees down to about waist height. We shuck all the leaves off. I put them on the trays that go in the dehydrator, dry them out, and then blend it up into powder. So I can get several trees worth of leaves condensed down into a quart jar like that, and I just stick them in the freezer, and one jar will last pretty much the whole year. And when you keep it fresh like that in the freezer, it stays that bright green color, so you know it's way better than what you're getting in the capsules or in the bags on the grocery store shelves. So other ways you can consume it are you can take that powder, put it in a smoothie, or you can just take the raw leaves and put them in a smoothie, and you could throw it in like a soup or a stir fry. You could do a whole lot of different things with it. I've even heard of people like putting a little bit in their coffee because the bitterness blends in well. There's so many different ways. We've actually used the roots, and I should have a picture of this. It's called the horseradish tree because the whole thing is a little spicy, but the roots are almost indistinguishable in flavor from horseradish. So a month or two ago, we actually dug up one of our trees and skinned the roots, chopped them up, food processor, salt, vinegar, taste tested it side by side. Pretty much the same. I could have added a little more salt, maybe, but really great way to use the whole plant, and it's fun to experiment like that. So the next one is chaya. This is Nidoscalis aconitifolius. Everybody say it with me. Nidoscalis aconitifolius. Yeah, we're going to get into some Latin names on these ones. So chaya is called Mexican tree spinach, and it's basically a bulletproof plant, just like moringa. Thrives in the drought, thrives in the full sun. You don't need to fertilize it. I plant these in the little swale strip next to my sidewalk that gets no water, no fertilization, nothing. And they grow gigantic. We harvest them all the time. She makes them into amazing dishes. They're very similar to collard greens when you cook them down. So they're high in protein, high in iron, calcium, and vitamin A. They have no pest problems whatsoever. That's because there's cyanide in the leaves. So that's a good thing, and we humans are smart enough to know that we can boil the leaves. You boil them for 10 minutes, all the cyanide's neutralized, and then you strain the water out, cook them up exactly like you would collard greens. They're delicious, very nutritious, available all year round, don't have to buy it. One of my favorite ways to eat it is you prepare them by boiling first, and then saute up some garlic and onions, chop some bacon on there, chop your chaya up, put it on there, saute, a little bit of apple cider vinegar. Amazing side dish. And they're just a great plant to have. You can grow them kind of like as a hedge. If you want to grow privacy, you can grow them in neglected areas. Really easy. So next one is longevity spinach, which this one's starting to get a little bit popular, kind of widespread. Particularly, it's very easy to propagate, so we grow a ton of it in our nursery. So this is Guinura procumbens, and it comes from Southeast Asia, where, just to note, like, South Florida's climate is very similar to Southeast Asia. So a lot of the tropical fruits and the vegetables that we grow are originally from there. And so when we're choosing things to grow in our climate, you just look at similar climates around the world. So longevity spinach is also called cholesterol spinach because it helps to regulate blood sugar. And it's a great ground cover in your landscape. I like to plant it around the base of my fruit trees to kind of cover the ground. It's like a living mulch, keeps the weeds down, very prolific, edible raw or cooked. It kind of has like a lettucey type crunch to it. And so that's a harvest from sometime this past week. You can put it like, my favorite ways are probably in a sandwich, or maybe mix a little bit into a salad, or throw some in a smoothie. And they have a great, like, you can tell there's nutrition in there by the flavor of it. It's not as strong as moringa, but another one just very easy to grow. Next one of my personal favorites actually, just to put in a meal, is called katuk. Soropis androgynous, and it's a jungle plant, comes from the rainforest, and it likes the shade, but it can tolerate the sun. They like a lot of water, but they can tolerate drought. Very tough plant. It's 50% protein content by weight. So incorporate this into dishes just to get that extra protein. It's a very flavorful, it's like, has like tastes like green peas or like raw broccoli. So it has that like nice nutty kind of rich flavor to it. So that's just one of our favorite. We probably throw it in a meal once a day. Just because they're easy to grow, they're all around the yard. And the tender new growth is definitely the best part.
Can you put it in salad?
Yeah, you can eat it raw. It's actually funny because I had like a Facebook conversation about this recently. There was some hype in the 90s in some country far away where the magazines or whatever the trending literature was promoting it as a weight loss plant to consume, and they were suggesting taking large amounts of katuk and juicing it and drinking the juice, and it would help you lose weight. Well, it turned out that it gave a lot of people like kidney problems and bronchial, some kind of crazy thing. So when you're taking like pounds and pounds of very nutrient-dense green and juicing it, just like you would expect if you did it with spinach, you'd have kidney problems. There's lots of calcium oxalates in there. So that's not how you eat it. It's good like you would cook any other kind of leafy green. So Everything's great in moderation. So another one that's one of my personal favorites is cranberry hibiscus. This is Hibiscus acetosella, and it's a perennial, but I like to grow it like an annual because after they bloom, they make the seed pods and they kind of look a little ratty, so I actually just chop them down, drop them directly in place. The seeds will come out and germinate a few months later, and you have fresh new plants. So they're blooming this time of year, and it's a very flavorful, leafy, not green, kind of leafy maroonish red burgundy to put in your diet. They have a kind of a tart, lemony, cranberry type flavor, and they're very high in antioxidants and anthocyanins, as you can see from the color. They grow all year and bloom in the fall, like I said. You can put them in a salad. They go great in like a Caesar salad. Definitely lends well to that flavor combination. I also like to saute them up. You can like cook it with scrambled eggs or with all different types of things, like a stir fry. So that's definitely a really fun one to grow. And there's so many different hibiscus species that, like okra is hibiscus, cotton is a hibiscus. There's a big edible leaf hibiscus. The leaves are like burrito wraps. So we grow all of those. That's just the one I wanted to highlight. The next one, the last one for the nutrition aspect would be Malabar spinach. And this is Bacella alba or Bacella rubra. There's two different varieties. This is the rubra because it's the red stems. And this is a very heat-tolerant, vining leafy green. It's basically the leafy green equivalent of okra. So if you like that like slimy, mucilaginous texture of okra, this is the leaf version. And that mucilaginous quality is very good for lining the inside of the gut. It's good for the digestive tract, and it also has cooling properties. So isn't it funny that this plant grows in 90-degree weather, and when you consume it, it actually cools down the body. So that's just definitely something to put on your list of leafy greens to try out. It's gonna be a whole lot more heat tolerant than your lettuce and your arugula and your mustard greens, although I do love those. So these are just things to try out in addition to your annual gardens. Ooh. Ty, what did I do? You got so many apps on here. How did I get that out of your hands? Oh. He was coaching me on this before I started.
Yes. It's funny. I have it on airplane mode and I keep getting notifications.
We're on an airplane. Don't make us crash. Thanks. Let's look at that picture again.
Happy bananas.
And feel free to interrupt me with a question at any point. Like if you're like, Chaya, that's poisonous. How could you be telling our children to eat that? Feel free to, give me that criticism. Okay, so we've covered the calories, we've covered the nutrition. Now, the third thing that I would put on my priority list to cover when you're growing all your own food would be medicinals. And so, obviously, you can probably tell what that is. I think more people need to be growing turmeric. This is Curcuma longa, and there's many different species and varieties of it. This is last winter's harvest, and they're very prolific, super easy to grow. Curcumin is the active ingredient, which is super anti-inflammatory. It's a powerful antioxidant. I truly think that this plant is a gift from God because it just covers so many things, and it's a great plant to incorporate in your cooking. Definitely obvious that it's the main spice used in curries to impart that orange color and that kind of earthy flavor to it. You plant it in the spring. They usually wait a long time to come up, about late April, early May. They'll grow through the summer. Sometimes they'll bloom. There's turmeric plants planted pretty densely in a row. You don't need a whole lot of space. They're beautiful plants. I like to grow them, and you can grow in the shade or in the sun. They're very hardy either way. They do like a lot of water if they're in the sun. So it's a great spice to use with many applications. They sit on the counter for a long time. You can preserve them. You make powder. You can juice it, mix it with orange juice. It's an excellent drink. Good for the joints and for inflammation. And it also can help with depression. And this is like a two-part process that I was looking into last year in my research. So we know that curcumin, the active ingredient in turmeric, has anti-inflammatory and antioxidant qualities. This is relevant because depression causes a heightened state of inflammation and oxidative stress, which can affect all the bodily organs, including the brain. So this chronic inflammation leads to decreased levels of serotonin and dopamine. Lack of sleep leads to degeneration in certain brain areas. Curcumin, however, can also help modulate the release of serotonin and dopamine. So it kind of, as far as an antidepressant, it combats that state on both ends. So in a physical way, it's just a really happy plant, and you can use it to, like I said, make curries. You can make juices. You can chop it up and make tea. You can make golden milk, which is basically turmeric tea with some coconut milk or a whole bunch of different things. Actually, black pepper is a catalyst that makes the curcumin compound more readily available for the body. So mixing a little bit of black pepper in there, it can kind of help you get the most out of it. So the next one is a close relative, which is ginger. And this is a fun one. Everybody say Zingiber officinale. So whenever you have a Latin name of a plant that ends in officinale or officinarium, something like that, that's because it's been recognized as the true medicinal variety of that plant. So ginger contains a compound called gingerol, which is also a powerful antioxidant. It has heating qualities. Like if you've ever, maybe I'm the only one, just taken a bite out of a chunk of raw ginger on a cold day, it can really warm you up. So it fires up the body, which is also signals an increase in metabolism. So it can kind of get your systems going. They're effective against nausea, inflammation, regulates blood sugar and cholesterol, helps with indigestion, pain relief. I've definitely heard it used as like a kind of pain relief for when women are on their menstrual cycle. So it can also help fight respiratory infections, like drink your ginger tea when you feel a cold coming on. It can definitely help in that regard. So a close relative, and I don't know what's going on, but I can't move forward. Right, there we go. Oh. It wouldn't go any farther. Yeah.
I was taken behind that for cancer.
Oh yeah?
It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It doesn't taste so good. I just put it in my shake.
It's a little peppery.
Yeah. But it's a great, great.
Yeah, that's why, make it into a powder, put it into everything you're eating. You're not going to taste it.
Yeah.
So,
It's a great thing.
Connection went down.
yeah, moringa is the multivitamin that grows on a tree. So, feel naked now. I don't have any pictures. It was all about the pictures.
That was all about you.
Okay. So I was going to mention the close relative of ginger is galangal, which is worth noting. It's referred to as Thai ginger. So if you've ever had tom kha soup from a Thai restaurant, that's the root that's used in there to flavor it. It's pretty similar to ginger, a little more, a little less of the spice, like heat, a little more of the bitter, earthy. So kind of in between the turmeric and the ginger flavor. The galangal is an evergreen plant. So ginger, there we go. Ginger comes up in the spring, grows through the summer, goes dormant in the winter. Galangal is going to be green and growing all year round. It's a hardier plant, can grow in full sun. Ginger likes the shade. So they're cousins and raised under different conditions. Thank you, Jenny. Really? I have like 30 more pictures.
Maybe let me see if they didn't get it. Maybe they didn't get imported. Sorry.
Galangal. 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 Alpinia galanga. In case you're taking notes. If you want, I want to use the photos so you guys know what plants I'm talking about as I'm mentioning them. So I guess while we see what's going on, you guys can ask some questions. We're going to do Q&A at the end, but if you want, throw anything at me.
Connor? Sorry, yeah, it'll just take me a second. We'll get the other slides. They didn't get imported all at the same time. I didn't realize you had so many.
I was up until 2:30 a.m. last night. Cheers.
Why does it take so long?
I was like, I need to deliver the information to the people. They need to know about Galangal. And, yeah.
What about bugs?
What about bugs? What about bugs? There's lots of kinds of bugs. There's bugs that eat your plants. There's bugs that eat the bugs that eat your plants. There's bugs you can eat. I'm not going to go there. We're not going to go into animal agriculture here. So, pests in the garden. Well, when you're trying to grow plants that don't normally grow here, like my criticism in the beginning of this, of the Yankee plants, you're going to get pests because they're going to, most of the time, be in a state of uncomfortable stress. Tomatoes come from the Mediterranean, where it's not humid, it's dry, there's always a breeze. And so when you put them here in a tropical climate where it's very humid, there's a lot of rain, there's all these different environmental factors, they're going to be a little uneasy and they're going to attract pests. So when you grow things that are naturally adapted to the climate, you get less pests. But that said, there's always going to be some type of pests, whether it be ants or aphids or caterpillars or squirrels or birds or your dog eats your garden, I don't know. But what we really want to do to combat the pests, instead of looking at it as an individual, like, I need to get rid of these caterpillars, you're going to think of it like, how can I attract the predator of the pest that's eating my plants? So if I have caterpillars eating my mulberry leaves or my tomatoes, how can I attract the predatory wasp that eats the caterpillars? How can I attract more birds into the garden to balance out that population of the pests? So, there's certain times where you have to step in and sprinkle cinnamon around the base of your tree to get the ants to go away. That's a little trick. They don't like cinnamon. So, it works pretty well on a potted plant, actually. If you got ants infesting your potted plant, just sprinkle cinnamon all over it. They can't communicate with the smell of the volatile oils and cinnamon, so they just kind of run away. It's pretty funny to watch, actually. Thank you so much. Okay. There's Galanga. Alpinia galanga.
Question.
Yeah.
On the pest track, how about iguanas? They eat everything.
I was hoping you wouldn't ask that. Iguanas are, well, there you go. So, yeah, you guys got a pellet gun? Yeah, iguanas are, let's just pray we get like one night where it gets below freezing this year, so the iguanas will all just I think 4 to 6 hours, they'll die. Any less than that, they'll fall off the power lines and then wake up a little bit later. So yeah, that's one thing that's, it's hard to do anything but build a moat and a 10-foot high wall around your garden. But you just keep planting. Like, they're not going to eat everything. I'm sure you've had some visceral experiences with iguanas, right?
Well, I live on a lake, so they're just multiplying.
Yeah, and they're definitely not a native. They're an invasive species. I think whether they are now or not, I think the state of Florida was actually sponsoring like iguana hunting at one point.
What I do is put chicken wire around it, and the top part of it, you use aluminum flashing.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
they
I've
climb
heard.
up there and they can't get over the top, but the little ones, you
Right.
gotta use a real small mesh.
I've heard like hanging CDs, and they don't like the reflecting lights. You really just gotta physically exclude them. If you live on a body of water like a lake or canal, you know they're crazy.
Or dead ones, like the hairs are up.
Yeah. Yeah. Fried iguana. Okay, so we're back on track. The next medicinal plant that I would like to mention is holy basil, Oxymum sanctum, as opposed to Oxymum basilicum, which is the tender Genovese Italian basil. This is a different species. It's, I know a lot of people probably have heard that when your basil plant starts flowering, you want to keep pinching the flowers off, otherwise it's going to get tough and the flavor is going to change. The sanctum species of basil are actually a flowering type that is more of a long-lived. You can let them flower. They're great for pollinators. The bees love them. I think I took that photo like in the spring. So you can see the little pollen sacs on his leg on the back. So great pollinator attractor, and that's kind of on the pest subject. That's something that can bring in the beneficials that are going to balance out the pests. So it's good to have a whole spread of different insect-attracting plants. So holy basil is a flowering, long-lived plant. It's a very fragrant herb. We love using it. Even like a couple of leaves or a flower tip, just put in your water. It infuses a really great flavor into it. It's considered what's called an adaptogenic herb, which it took me a while to understand the definition of this, but basically it increases the body's ability to resist the damaging effects of stress and promote or restore normal physiological functioning.
Wow.
So adaptogenic herbs just kind of help your body adapt to different stressors. So great thing to have in your daily regimen. I like to use holy basil as a tea herb. You can cut the flowering tips off, throw them in a pot, simmer, maybe mix it with something else like chamomile or green tea. Really great flavor. So it's also an antioxidant, it's anti-inflammatory, good for digestion, and all the great qualities that aromatic herbs have. And it actually helps to regulate cortisol, which is the stress hormone, as some of you probably know. So, great one to have. And that question, why does my basil always die, doesn't quite as often apply to the sanctum species. Okay, next one. Some of you probably are familiar with this. This is Cuban oregano. Everybody say Plectranthus amboinicus. Amboinicus. So that's a variegated version. There's lots of different pretty types. There's a green one, there's that variegated one, there's one with like pink stems that has a camouflage color on the top of the leaf. So this is very similar in its flavor and aromatic qualities as the traditional Italian oregano, except it's way more of a hardier plant that thrives in the tropics. It grows much more prolifically, super easy to grow. You can root cuttings very easily. Like I said, there's a bunch of different varieties and different species than the amboinicus. There's also one that's called scaredy cat oregano, which is Plectranthus caninus, I think, and it's supposed to repel cats, but our outdoor cat seems to not really care, but we think there's something wrong with him anyway. And then also another relative is the Vicks plant, which is where the Vicks vapor rub comes from. Little more of a strong kind of medicinal fragrance to it. You wouldn't particularly want to use that one in your cooking, but it's great as an aromatic herb. You can just boil it and kind of inhale the fumes. It clears out your throat. And so they have strong antibacterial properties, just like regular oregano. Helps to fight respiratory infections. You can use Cuban oregano to flavor meats. You can use it in sauces. You can put a little bit in some tea and various herb blends. We like to use it in a rub. I personally have not dehydrated it because I always have some fresh to use, but I imagine you can do that. But we like to just use it fresh because it grows all year round. So that's a great herb to have on your repertoire. And number 5 of the medicinals is the elderberry plant, Sambucus nigra, which is a Florida native, and you've probably seen the elderberry syrup on the shelves at Whole Foods. You've probably tried it. It's a great alternative to pharmaceutical cough syrup. So this is Florida's native immune booster, and there's different varieties and species that grow all the way up the eastern part of the U.S. So it's a great plant. They like to grow kind of on the edge of a forest or in a low spot. Like if you drive out to Pahokee, you'll see them growing in the ditches on the side of the sugarcane fields. Those white flowers, that would be your elderberry. So that's one growing right on the side of the little estuary there. So you can also use the flowers. You can make tea with them. It's a nice, like, sweet, perfumey fragrance to it, kind of mild. I've even heard them being used, like, you could make elderberry flower fritters. So people get creative with them. They grow very easily. Obviously, anything that has that deep purple color is going to be high in antioxidants, lots of vitamins, anthocyanins. It's a good flavor too. Like, you wouldn't use cough syrup on your pancakes, but you can make elderberry syrup that would be delicious. So, there's so many ways to use it. Just crush up some elderberries, put some seltzer water in there. Great, in the fall and winter when it's like flu season. So, we've covered calories, nutrition, medicine. Let's move on to the fun stuff. The fruits. So this is really my passion. It's so fun to grow fruits, and I used to want to grow every single fruiting plant that you could possibly fit into a small backyard. And it's definitely, there's something to say about pushing the limits, pushing the zone, trying to grow things that maybe want to grow a little farther north, or maybe are a little too cold sensitive to grow here. We're borderline tropical, so you can get away with a lot. There's not many places in the world you can grow peaches and soursop and jackfruit all in the same yard. But I like to really just focus on, and what I focus on in the nursery is the fruits that are what I would consider staples for South Florida backyards. Like, what's going to produce reliably every year, right on time, that you can depend on, and you're going to get a lot of, without a whole lot of input. You're not going to have to put a blanket around it on that one cold night. So I've got a bunch, and I'm just going to kind of blow through them really quickly. That's just a handful of different things. Yeah, there's a fig there, there's some lemon catnip guava, and there's some Montingia fruits, also known as the strawberry tree. So that's a box from this summer. That's like one day of walking around the yard, picking up mangoes, passion fruit, papaya, and bananas. That picture got a lot of likes on Instagram. So mangoes would be my number one recommendation. most people have a mango tree. You drive around town, like you drive over a bridge in the middle of winter, you're gonna see all the mango trees blooming in West Palm Beach. So we are in the mango capital of the country, if not the world, in case you didn't know. South Florida has the most diverse spread of different varieties of mangoes from all over the world that are grown here. We actually have the largest producer of different mango plants in the continental U.S. and probably in all of North and South America, which is Zill High Performance Plants. Gary Zill is a breeder that started in the 80s, planting out 10,000 seedlings to narrow it down to maybe 25 choice varieties. So when you buy a grafted mango tree, just know a lot of hard work went into developing those selected varieties, and your seedling tree is not always going to produce the best fruit. It may never produce fruit, it may have disease problems. So that's why we plant grafted trees, because you're going to get a named variety that you know what the fruit is like. It's been already judged to be top quality. Some of them are disease resistant and dwarfing, and it's nice to know these characteristics before you plant them. So there's hundreds of varieties. This is a giant tree that is probably half the reason I bought my house. This is a tree that was planted in the 1930s in the Northwood neighborhood of West Palm. And this variety is called Edward. Amazing fruit, they're beautiful, usually the first one to fruit every year. And I'm very partial to them. I think they're underrated, disease resistant, all sorts of good qualities. So that one is kind of a creamy, like hint of coconut, very smooth, no fiber type flavor. And mangoes can range from that side of the spectrum to like the resinous, complex, and almost kind of spicy flavor spectrum, and everything in between. So there's mangoes for everybody. There's lemon meringue, there's orange sherbet, pina colada, coconut cream, fruit punch, all different kinds of amazing ones. If there's any Jamaicans in the house, I could just name Julie Mango, and that's like to die for them. So if I had to pick one fruit to grow, that would probably be it. Yes, that's my dirty farmer hands. So that's number one. Avocado, of course. Huge commercial crop, right? We pay a lot of money for avocados. And unfortunately, most of the avocados we buy at the grocery store in Florida are shipped in from California because everybody wants the Haas avocado. Because they think, oh, there's the Haas, that good one, and then there's the Florida avocado, which is the watery, big, watermelon-sized one that's kind of like not that great. So there's so many avocados. There's hundreds of varieties of avocados as well. So it's not just Haas in Florida. What you're looking for in the Haas avocado is that high oil content, high fat content, like rich, creamy flavor. The Haas avocado is imported from California because that tree, the genetics don't sit well with Florida. They don't like the humidity. That's more of a Mexican type avocado that kind of likes that dry California climate. So we have varieties like this one this is Brogdon, which is probably my personal favorite for this year at least. And it's a beautiful fruit. They're similar to the Haas in that they have that high oil content, that great creamy flavor. They're a cold hardy plant as well, so you can grow them like in North Florida even. They're not ultra tropical. Beautiful fruit. And one quality I like better than the Haas is actually the skin. Sometimes you'll get a Haas avocado and that skin is kind of thick and bumpy and it'll feel hard, but it's super like overripe on the inside. And that also is a factor of being imported, being picked early, they'll ripen unevenly. So the Brogdon, just to talk it up a little bit, has a thinner skin. The color change is a little more indicative of the ripeness, and you can feel when it starts to give. So like that's probably my top recommended. for your backyard. Either Brogdon or Day avocado is a really good one too. That's a green one that's roughly the same size as a Haas and has that high oil content as well. So again, like these are grafted trees. They're trialed and they're the best of the best, and that's why they're propagated over and over again through grafting. So the little avocado seed that you sprout in the cup of water with the toothpicks, like somebody mentioned earlier, that's fun, but that's not how you grow an avocado anyway. You put the seed in the dirt and let it grow into a tree. I mean, and sometimes you can plant an avocado seed and get a really good fruit. It might take 8 to 10 years as opposed to planting a grafted tree, which might take 2 or 3 years, and you know what you're going to get. It's going to be a good one. I'm not against planting fruit trees from seed, but there's something to be, I want you guys to understand like the value of these breeding projects that are done, because there's so much different genetic variety in fruits, and some of them are kind of and some of them are like, I'll travel across the state to get a little piece of that tree to bring it to my collection. So we can thank all the great breeders like Gary Zill for that. Okay, so next one, I told you we'd be back to it. So that's my wife, Iris, holding a smaller bunch of bananas. And so we grow lots of bananas. I have about a dozen varieties planted. And there's so many different types, all better than the grocery store banana. When you grow them at home, you can let them hang on the plant until the fruit turns color and is fully plumped up and ripe. Commercially, you're buying one variety, it's called Grand Nain, and they harvest it at about 60-70% mature. And then they ship it, and they have to gas it with ethylene gas, which is not harmful. That's the gas that ripening fruit naturally emits. But when you harvest it too early and you have to make it look ripe for the shelves, you gas it, put it on that 7-Eleven shelf, and it's just kind of when you've grown them at home, you know that those bananas in the store are just totally subpar. So yeah, homegrown is best. And like I mentioned before, it's a starch crop, but it's also a great fruit crop.
We have a bunch of them, but I can't seem to get them to grow very long because they're there, they're everywhere, they don't produce very well.
How much water are they getting?
They get the lower part of the yard, they get water.
Well, okay, so bananas are very greedy plants. They want all the water. They want all the fertility, all the mulch. They don't necessarily need full sun. You can actually grow them in partial shade. They're a jungle plant naturally, so dapple white is fine. But they are water hogs, fertilizer hogs.
I never fertilizer.
Anything high in nitrogen and potassium, organic or not, you can't burn a banana plant with fertilizer. You can never give them too much. So bananas are not actually trees. They're a giant herb. I think it's actually considered the largest herb in the world. So that's a variety called Namois, which is the same one we also harvested yesterday, that larger one I was holding. That one grows 12 to 16 feet tall, which is pretty tall. And when you're harvesting and you have to drop the whole trunk to get the fruit, it can kind of get in the way. So there's also dwarf varieties. There's varieties that'll fruit anywhere from, there's some that'll fruit at 3 feet tall, the truly tiny, super dwarf Cavendish is one. And then there's dwarf Orinoco, which will fruit at about shoulder height. That's in the grocery store, the one that's going to be labeled as the burro banana. So it's used as a plantain. It's also used as a ripe one, as a dessert banana. And there's also Mona Lisa and Goldfinger, and there's dwarf Namois. There's red bananas. There's Thai black ornamental bananas. There's so many different bananas, and I'm totally a collector. So you can ask me about bananas all day long. I'm going to try not to keep going on about bananas, because I will. Okay, so papaya, also one that's very commonly grown, easy to grow, also not a tree. This is an herb. It's a very fast-growing herb. They can grow 6 feet in 6 months and start fruiting in 6 months if they're planted in an ideal location with lots of sun and water and just a good position. So, like I said, they can fruit in 6 months from seed, and the prime is about from the first fruit till second or third year, and then they kind of fade out, and they're a short-lived perennial, so like 3 to 5 years maximum. I like to grow plants. If they're doing well, I'll keep them for 2 years if they keep fruiting. Sometimes, like if it's a male plant that's not going to fruit, or if it's just struggling, I'll just take them out. You can go out with the seeds and just around the whole yard. Wait for them to come up in the right spot where they're happy. Keep that one. Keep that one. Cut the other one that's struggling. Super easy to grow papayas. So I recommend planting a few of them because they don't take up a whole lot of space. Sometimes you get a male. It's going to pollinate the females, but it's not going to fruit. So another misconception is you need a male and a female. No, you don't. You need a female plant will fruit. The male determines whether there's going to be seeds in the fruit. And even if you don't have a male plant in your yard, anywhere within a couple miles, the pollen can drift. So I've had female papayas with seeded fruit and no males on the property. So, no. Avocado, that's a misconception. There are A and B type flowers. So the avocado flower it has a male stage and a female stage at different parts of the day. So the type A, I'm not exactly sure which is which off the top of my head, but like the type A, for example, would be male in the morning, female at night. The type B would be female in the morning, male at night. So it can help if you have a type A and B avocado to have increased pollination, but it's not necessary. The pollen will drift around the plants and help to fertilize all those flowers, even if you just have one plant. So you may be thinking, Connor, why no citrus trees? We live in Florida. This is like orange juice territory, right? No. Okay. No more citrus, guys. Get it out of your heads. Still not very commonly known. There is a disease called citrus greening, which was introduced to the state in 2005. And it's been 15 years, and the citrus industry is completely wiped out for the most part, unless you're injecting like heavy chemicals and really regulating. It's a disease. The citrus greening disease is spread by a pest called the citrus psyllid, and it's fatal. It causes the tree to not be able to uptake the nutrients. So that's why a lot of times you'll buy a lemon tree, plant it out, leaves start curling, gets ugly, gets chlorotic. Maybe it sets some fruit, but they never mature, or they're bitter. The tree just never grows. So that would be citrus greening. And I don't grow citrus in my nursery because it's a health hazard, because the state of Florida requires that any citrus grower follow a strict and regular pesticide schedule. These chemicals are nasty. It's completely artificial, so I think it's honestly a scam when these big box stores are selling nothing but 90% citrus trees. Bring them home, plant them. Next year, they've never grown, they're looking ugly. You just rip out of the ground, and then it demotivates people. They're like, why can't I grow fruit? I'm trying to grow mandarin oranges because it's Florida. It's supposed to be the best thing for it. Unfortunately, not anymore. We all remember like climbing on our parents' or our grandparents' grapefruit tree, and there are still specimens that have evaded the citrus greening. There are wild specimens that maybe have resistant genetics. There's research going on, but generally I don't advise anyone to plant citrus trees in their backyard because number one, you're not going to get the result you want. Number two, you're contributing to the spread of the citrus greening disease. Number three, you're going to just be discouraged from planting fruit trees. So skip the citrus until maybe years from now, either the industry gets replaced with a more suitable crop, or there's enough research being done, like, hey, we found resistant varieties, or immune varieties, or a way to actually cure the disease. But as of now, it's looking bleak. So we've got dozens of other fruits to focus on. Like, yeah. Most of the citrus in the stores is coming from California. And that's why the citrus, like, shipping plant material in and out of the state is so heavily regulated because California has a huge citrus industry and they cannot afford to have any of the infected Florida material make their way over there. So, you know, let's hope that California retains that because, you know, I'm not hating on oranges, but I'm biased against them now. So, yeah. So, Sapodilla. Oh, it disappeared.
Michael?
Just imagine what a sapodilla fruit looks like. Do any of you guys know what a sapodilla is? Okay, you guys know.
Where's Michael?
I don't know.
Sapodilla, you've probably seen them around town and not know what it was. They're kind of a very, like, not super distinguished brown type of fruit. I'm just gonna, you can't see it, so I'm just gonna describe it to you. They're a pretty tree, very symmetrical. It's actually a great tree for its wind tolerant qualities, like when the hurricanes blow through the keys. When all the keys get flattened by hurricanes, the sapodilla trees are actually the ones that are left standing. Very wind tolerant, they can get up to 100 feet tall in the tropics. So there's the fruits. Those are not full size. Some varieties are bigger, smaller. This is what the fruit looks like on the inside. So, severely underrated fruit. These taste like a juicy, like brown sugar soaked pear that melts in your mouth. And their sugar content is insanely high. So, you can eat the skin. Yeah, it doesn't have an off-putting flavor. You can also, it's a relative of the mamey, every time you say that. So like mamey and canistel are also great sapote fruits. This one is Manocara zapota. So there's a bunch of different varieties. Like I said, there's not even enough varieties because it's so underrated, but they produce all year round. Trees are extremely hardy, drought tolerant, don't need a lot of attention. You can keep them small from pruning.
How large is the fruit?
The fruit can get, on average, the size of like a good lemon, like a nice large size lemon. And some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger. They can range from like brown flesh to more of like a crimson interior. You can kind of see a little bit of that. They'll fruit all year round, so the fruit take about 9 months to ripen from flower to fruit, and I think you can see the little, very subtle flowers up above those fruit. So they sit on the tree for a long time, but they keep going year round, so there's generally a spring, early summer, heavier season for sapodilla, but all year round, the trees are holding fruit, and you'll get, every once in a while, you'll get a sapodilla. So, delicious fruit. Delicious. Plant a sapodilla tree. I mean, look at that. Go.
Next one, Barbados cherry, also known as acerola cherry. Really good one to keep small. You can keep it like trained like a shrub. They're very much conducive to being grown as a bush, or you can grow it up like a standard tree. And very prolific tropical cherry, not related to the northern cherries, but these are actually 30 days from flower to fruit, and they can make 4 to 5 crops per year successively. Sometimes they just keep going. So Barbados cherries are delicious. They have 134% of your daily vitamin C content in one cherry. So they are actually used as a source for a vitamin C extract. So if you look up acerola, A-C-E-R-O-L-A, there's capsules and that's used as a natural source for ascorbic acid or vitamin C. Why not just plant a Barbados cherry? They're delicious, they make a great juice. You can just pop them in your mouth as you're walking through the garden. Small trees like this big will already be fruiting often. And just delicious. Put it on vanilla ice cream, right?
How long is that from flower to fruit?
The flower, I don't have a picture, the little cute pink flowers, and they'll take 30 days to turn into a ripened red fruit. So easy tree to manage, and they like being pruned too. So you can keep it small, it's a nice like little dooryard tree. Next one, a lot of you are probably familiar with starfruit, carambola. Extremely prolific trees. If you have one that's healthy and happy, you know it can produce 2 or 3 times a year. As they get bigger, it's almost constantly. And you would be surprised how much a little tree can hold. This tree in particular, this is from about 2 weeks ago. That tree's no more than this big, and it's got branches on the ground because of the weight of the fruit. So it's a good one. You can keep it small because you're still going to get a ton of fruit. And great one for the bees too. The little pink, purplish flowers makes the bees really happy. So also high in vitamin C and very refreshing and juicy. Like if you bought a starfruit from the store, you've probably been ripped off by buying like a sour, green, astringent fruit. They're picked early because these fruit do not have a shelf life at all. Maybe like a day or 2 if you're very careful with them. You can't ship them unless you pick them green and unripe and they're sour. So when you grow them at home, you can let them fully ripen on the tree, and all of that astringent, it's called calcium oxalate, or oxalic acid, all of that is just in the green ridges. And I just like to slice them off, or I'm just eating one out in the garden, I'll just kind of bite it off and just get the little strips off, and then just bite into it. They're super juicy, and it's just an awesome tree to have, like, on a hot day. Pick a starfruit, refresh yourself. Worms in the fruit? Papaya would be one that can have fruit fly problems. Sometimes when they're small and green and like tiny little fruits, the certain species of fruit fly, or they call it a papaya wasp, they'll burrow into it and they'll lay their eggs, and you might have like a papaya that's got some fruit fly larvae in it. But I've generally not had that much of a problem with it. So that's one. None of the other ones I've mentioned have ever had pest problems getting into them. No. Well, yeah, guava is one I was going to mention. It's kind of what stands out for me for fruit flies and worms. So guava, I love growing them. I just didn't put it on the list because I don't consider it a tree that's going to be like super reliable and productive and kind of like a staple as far fruits go. But definitely plant them if you want, if you can. If you like guava, there's tons of different varieties. There's like green skin, white flesh, yellow skin, pink flesh, green skin, pink flesh. There's little Catley guavas, but be aware you might need a bag of fruit. So to keep the fruit fly around.
What kind of star fruit do you recommend this variety?
There's a few good ones. This one is called Bell, which is a real big fruit. Like, I picked one that was the size of my entire hand the other day. So those are real sweet, prolific. Another really good one, if you look for it, is called Kari, K-A-R-I. And then there's Fwang Tung, which is a white star fruit. Those three are kind of my top choices. I actually don't have any star fruit trees today, but if you guys ever come to the nursery and you feel inclined to buy a star fruit tree, we've got a few varieties there. And if you come relatively soon, there's fruit on all the trees. So if you want to taste test your carambola before you buy it. Yep. So the next one of my personal favorites. Who has heard of the Jaboticaba tree? Iris. Yeah, you. Okay. So how cool is that, right?
That is awesome.
That's called a florist production, when the fruit grow directly off of the trunk. So the Jaboticaba is a hip new trending tree that comes from Brazil. It's called Plinia jaboticaba or Plinia cauliflora, and there's tons of different varieties. They're very slow growing, beautiful aesthetic trees. Great one to have in your like right next to your front door as a dooryard specimen. They can take, this variety is the most common one. It's called Sabara, and they can take 8 to 12 years to fruit from seed. So, yeah, it's an investment in time, but when they start fruiting, they can fruit extremely prolifically and several times a year. There's also varieties like the red hybrid, which can fruit in 4 to 5 years from seed. Really great fruit. That's a hybrid of this Jaboticaba crossed with the white Jaboticaba. So there's a lot of guys out there doing, collecting these rare varieties from Brazil and different places in the Amazon and kind of making them more widely available in the U.S. If you ever go down to Fruit and Spice Park down in the Redlands, south of Miami, they have a good collection of Jaboticaba trees if you go at the right time of year. This is one of those trees. You know, I left with a bag of them. So. But really great tree to grow, even in a pot. You could grow it even if you just have a balcony somewhere. They enjoy being in a pot long term. Don't have issues with outgrowing the pot. They don't have issues with being root bound. They do like a lot of water, but they will fruit in a pot and be happy long term. So that's the Jaboticaba. Who knows about jackfruit? That's the largest tree-borne fruit in the world. They can get up over 100 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
So at market prices of $2 to $2.50 per pound, that's quite an investment, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're growing them at home, they grow super well in Florida. It actually used to be thought that jackfruit was too tropical for South Florida. It just wouldn't make it through the winter. That's changing as more people grow jackfruit in South Florida. The genetics actually become adapted. The ones that survive and thrive and produce are the ones whose seeds get planted out, and then those genetics are carried on. So we're kind of breeding this tropical tree to be able to grow in the subtropics. And it's an amazing fruit. Some people hear oh, it smells terrible, it smells like just the sewer or whatever. It doesn't, they're amazing. Durian is another story, but jackfruit is actually used as a vegetarian meat substitute sometimes. That's a whole process where you have to pick it at the right stage, and you have to process that giant fruit to get the edible parts out, and then you cook it like pulled pork. I enjoy them ripe. They're one of my favorite fruits ripe. If I had the space, I would grow 100 jackfruit trees. They're actually, the original flavor of the juicy fruit gum came from the jackfruit tree. So, but that's like pales in comparison to a fresh, ripe jackfruit. And there's kind of crunchy, firm varieties. There's soft, like melt in your mouth, bubblegum type varieties. There's some orange and red fleshed ones. They're delicious. So, jackfruit is a great tree. They get pretty big. Yeah, they grow more vertical than wide, which can be a good thing. They're very fast growing. So that big of a fruit, you would think the tree needs to be pretty old to make it. They can actually grow and produce in about 3 years from seed. Like seed directly in the ground, 6 foot tall after a year, 12 foot tall, 20 foot tall, holding 50-pound fruits on it. So they actually don't grow super wide. So if you're concerned about space, that's a factor to be aware of. But if you ever get the chance to try jackfruit and you haven't, go for it, but be aware that sometimes a jackfruit might not have been picked at the right stage, so you really want to go to a good source. Go to a jackfruit farmer. Maybe ask me later who's the best jackfruit farmer. So, a lot of you probably know about mulberries, right? Okay. Mulberry is a tree that's native to North America, and they have a very wide growing range. They can grow all the way up from like zone 7 up in like Pennsylvania area, all the way down into the tropics. And there's varieties that are native to Florida. There's a whole bunch of different mulberries out there. There's the Pakistani, which is like this long of a fruit, like a long dangly finger. And there's the Florida Giant, which is a nice blackberry-sized fruit that fruits in the spring. This is the Illinois Everbearing. So there's everbearing types that will fruit multiple times a year, or they'll fruit kind of all year. Some of them will put out a burst of fruit in response to pruning. So those would be like the everbearing types that you can keep small. There's dwarf-type mulberries. You can make mulberry syrup out of them and mulberry jams, and you can pick them until your face turns purple. Very productive tree. So the next one is one of my favorites. I like to talk up. This is the strawberry tree, also known as Jamaican cherry, also known as Montingia. Everyone say Montingia. Montingia calibura is the Latin name. So these are a bunch of strawberry tree fruits. Little fruits that pop in your mouth. They taste like cotton candy. They're amazing. And they grow super fast. They grow like an umbrella-shaped tree. They can make shade. They're great for kids. They honestly do taste like cotton candy, kettle corn, and kind of sweet buttered popcorn flavor. And through the whole warm part of the year, like spring into yesterday, we were just out there like getting distracted, just picking strawberry tree fruits off our tree. So they'll fruit kind of all summer and spring and fall long, and then take a break in the wintertime. Very easy tree to grow. And it's called the strawberry tree. I don't have a picture of the flower. It's called the strawberry tree because the flower looks similar to a strawberry flower. So sometimes people comment, I'm like, oh, have you heard of the strawberry tree? And I'm like, they don't grow on trees. You're lying to me. No, it's the Jamaican cherry. Okay, so soursop. I was talking to a gentleman about soursop earlier. There's plenty of different varieties of fruits in the Annona family. This is Annona muricata. There's also a sugar apple. That's the Annona squamosa. There's cherimoya. There's atamoya. There's custard apple. There's rollinia. And there's tons of breeding going on for these kind of underutilized species of fruit trees. But I wanted to highlight the soursop because it's kind of my personal favorite out of them. And they're delicious fruit. They also have anti-cancer qualities. The leaves are actually, there's a good market for the leaves as an anti-cancer kind of supplement. You can make tea with them. And they actually have a nice kind of sourish, fragrant flavor to them. But the fruit is also called graviola, and it has a delicious, juicy, white flesh. Soursop smoothies are a great thing to make. I just like to eat a whole fruit out of hand and just get a crazy sugar rush. So that's one that's probably the most cold sensitive tree that I mentioned. Anytime we get down below the 50s, you might lose some leaves on your soursop tree, but generally they survive and they come back really strong. Summer. They can have kind of a long season. Like a mango is going to be, 3 months out of the year, every year, like April to June or whatever. But some of these trees are kind of here and there with a heavier crop season in the summer, like the soursop. Okay, last one, passion fruit. Everybody goes crazy over passion fruit, and they cost like $5 a fruit at the store sometimes, which is insane. Our vine made 600 fruit this spring, and I take no care of it at all. You gotta know that it's a vigorous, tropical, wild rainforest vine that will need a good amount of space in full sun and a fence or a trellis or a tree to climb on. If you give it that and get it off to a good start with some fertile soil and mulch it and give it water, your vine will make you $5 a fruit. That's like paying your mortgage. So the flowers, and I don't know why I didn't put a picture of the flower, but I'm sure some of you guys have seen passion fruit flowers. They're just so beautiful. Like purple, white, very delicate, like intricate looking flowers. So there's plenty of different species of passion fruit. We're talking about Passiflora edulis, and there's like the maypop and the Passiflora incarnata and all the native ones. But this is the fruiting one that you can let it grow wherever it's going to grow. The fruit will just drop when they're ripe, and then you just go hunt for them every morning. They can land on the ground, it's not going to damage the fruit, they have thick skin, so you just kind of go looking in the bushes for passion fruit, and that's all the work that needs to be done. And then when they're done fruiting, you take a machete and cut it off your neighbor's tree like I had to do.
What's the name?
Passion fruit?
No, the particular.
Oh, it's Passiflora edulis. This is a variety called purple possum, and I guess it should be noted that some people have concerned, like they won't, their passion fruit flowers won't get pollinated, they won't set fruit. So that can happen if you plant a passion fruit from seed, or if you have a variety that's not self-pollinating. So the purple possum is a self-pollinating vine. You don't need to get out there with a paintbrush in the middle of the night and make sure that each flower gets pollinated. The vine will kind of lean on the side of pollinating itself with the help of the bees and butterflies. And it's also a host plant for the Gulf fritillary butterfly, which is a smallish orange butterfly. They'll lay their their eggs on the vine. The caterpillars will chew up the leaves a little bit, turn into butterflies, and then pollinate your passion fruit flowers for you. So when you plant one and you see these little spiky, menacing looking caterpillars on them, as long as your vine's not tiny and newly planted, just let them go. The vine's going to outgrow the rate at which the caterpillars can eat it anyway. So that's a great one to have, just because when you're growing a food forest, you want to think of your layers, like your ground cover layer, your roots in the ground, then your your herbs that are a little bit higher, then your kind of bushy, mid-level plants, you got your trees, and then you got your vine layer that can grow in the spaces in between, like in the vertical space. So all of these fruits I'm mentioning because they grow extremely well here. These are like my top choices as far as what to plant to make sure that you get a good reward for your efforts. And I think if we're gardening, if we're putting energy into our land and growing food, you should plant the things that are going to reward you. And then once you got all that covered, grow your tomatoes and grow your arugula and grow, maybe try a citrus tree. I'm not going to recommend it. So, grow food, not lawns, is our kind of motto. So our goal really is to turn liabilities into assets. We're turning lawns into food forests. Because your lawn, nobody likes to pay the lawn guy, nobody likes to mow their lawn themselves. Not that it can't be satisfying, but it's all of your expended energy and the cost is going out the window because you can't eat your lawn. And it's just this unquestioned kind of paradigm standard that we all have, and we don't really ask why. And the HOAs, God forbid you live in an HOA, they mandate it, and you have to fight tooth and nail to be able to get your lawn out of there and plant a fruit tree. But the paradigm shift in that sense is kind of happening. What I do is a growing industry. There's tons of people that do what I do. There's in all different states, but obviously in tropical Florida, there's much more room to grow. Forgive the pun for this kind of thing. So it's super exciting for me, and I've only been doing this for a few years, and I love it. So just super blessed to be growing these things and talking to you guys about it. I would like to do more kind of education. Maybe if we do another one of these, I can talk about like what are the principles to actually grow some of these things, because there is input required. There is that human element of, not that you have to slave over your plants, but we need to be an input in the system in order to keep the soil covered so that that soil life can be thriving. We need to be pruning several times a year to help keep the light coming in. We need to know what needs water, what sun orientation certain trees need, where to plant them. So maybe we can cover that later. And there's a whole realm of different plants that you can grow to support your main crops. Like you could grow Mexican sunflower, which is a fast-growing plant. I call it chop and drop. Chop it down once it gets 8 feet tall. Throw the leaves down around your banana trees or whatever it may be near